right, everyone, welcome back. Ready for another deep dive.
Always. Let's do it.
Okay, so today we're looking into some pretty interesting claims about what went down during the 2016 presidential transition.
Interesting.
Yeah, that time between when someone wins the election and actually takes office. It's like what really happens behind the scenes.
Right. Lots of moving parts, for sure.
Exactly. So we've got two sources we're going to be digging into, and they both feature this guy, Jay Sekulow. He's a pretty vocal conservative activist.
Okay. Familiar with the name.
Yeah, so first up, we've got a segment from the Alex Jones Show. Now, Alex Jones, for anyone who doesn't know, he's known for his, let's say, unique take on things.
Right. Very out there.
Exactly. Lots of conspiracy theories, that kind of thing. And in this segment, he's actually talking about an Islamic leftist plot against Trump, which is, pretty out there.
Wow.
Yeah, but here's the thing. He also admits that he's been wrong about the threat of Islam before.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Yeah, and then he brings on Jay Sekulow and basically praises him for, confirming his current analysis. And that's what kind of struck me as odd. Why is he so quick to trust this guy who's basically echoing his own views, even though he's admitted to being wrong before? What do you make of that?
Well, it's a good example of how echo chambers work, When you're constantly surrounded by information that reinforces your beliefs, it becomes really easy to just accept it without question.
Yeah, even if it's not really based in fact.
Exactly. And that's why it's so crucial to be critical of the information we're consuming, especially when it comes from sources known for strong biases.
Okay, so you're saying that just because Alex Jones is saying it doesn't mean it's true, no matter how much he insists that it is.
Right, exactly. Always a good idea to double check, look for evidence, and consider other perspectives.
Yeah, that's your point. Now, Sekulow's main accusation is that the Obama administration basically staged a soft coup against Trump.
A soft coup. That's a pretty serious charge.
It is. And he claims they did this mainly through intelligence leaks. We've actually got a clip of him making this argument on Sean Hannity's show on Fox News. Let's take a listen.
All right, let's hear it.
Okay, so in this clip, Sekulow gets pretty deep into the weeds, even bringing up stuff like the Espionage Act and minimization procedures. To be honest, I'm not really sure what all that means.
Yeah, those are some pretty technical terms.
Can you break it down for us? What's he actually talking about?
Sure. So the Espionage Act, basically, it makes it illegal to share classified information that could harm national security. And Sekulow is claiming that the Obama administration was leaking stuff about Trump, which could potentially be a violation of that act.
Okay, and what about minimization procedures? What are those?
So those are guidelines that intelligence agencies use to protect the privacy of U.S. citizens when they're conducting surveillance on foreign targets. So, for instance, let's say the NSA is monitoring a foreign ambassador's communications, right?
Okay.
And they accidentally intercept a conversation with a U.S. citizen. Minimization procedures dictate how they're supposed to handle that information to avoid unnecessarily invading that citizen's privacy.
So Sekulow is saying that these procedures were basically ignored to target Trump and his people. But wouldn't that be really hard to prove?
It would require a ton of evidence, showing a deliberate and intentional disregard for those procedures. And so far, he hasn't really provided any of that.
That's what I thought. He also brings up this executive order that Obama signed, one that expanded the NSA's ability to share globally intercepted communications with other intelligence agencies. And he's making it sound like this was all part of some evil plan to, undermine Trump.
Right, but the thing is, that executive order, it's complicated. Like a lot of things in the intelligence world, there are legitimate concerns about potential misuse when you're sharing more data between agencies. But there are also valid arguments for doing it from a national security perspective.
So it's not as simple as Sekulow's making it sound.
Not at all. It's a balancing act, trying to protect privacy while also ensuring national security.
Okay, that makes sense. But Sekulow really emphasizes the timing of this executive order. It was deliberately signed right before Obama left office, as if that proves it was all about targeting Trump.
He's definitely implying a direct link there, but it's important to remember that correlation doesn't equal causation, right? There could be other explanations for the timing. Maybe it was just administrative backlog, or a shift in intelligence priorities that had nothing to do with the incoming administration.
Yeah, you're right. It's easy to jump to conclusions when you see a pattern, but there might be a simpler explanation that we're missing.
Exactly. And that's why it's so crucial to think critically about the information we're presented with and not just accept it at face value, even if it seems to fit a certain narrative.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. But before we go any further, I have to mention something that happened during the Alex Jones segment that just completely threw me off.
Oh.
What's that? So they're in the middle of this serious discussion about coups and espionage, and suddenly they cut to an ad for caveman bone broth.
Whoa, really?
Yeah. It was so jarring, like, the Republic is at stake, but hey, at least you can have strong bones.
Hmm.
But then I started thinking, it's actually a pretty clever marketing tactic, you know? They're tapping into the anxieties of their audience and then offering a product that's supposed to make you feel, like, strong and resilient.
Yeah, it's definitely a targeted strategy playing on those emotions. And sadly, it often works.
Makes you wonder how much of what we see and hear is deliberately crafted to influence us,
All
right?
the time, yeah.
So going back to Sekulo's claims, one thing that really struck me is that he doesn't actually offer any concrete evidence to support his accusations.
You're right. It's a lot of insinuation and opinion, but not much in the way of hard facts.
Exactly. And he's using all this legal jargon, but it's like he's building a narrative based on speculation
Yeah.
rather than actually presenting a case.
And that's a classic red flag. When someone makes bold claims without backing them up with solid evidence, it's a sign that you need to be extra cautious.
Okay, so are we saying we shouldn't believe anything Sekulo's saying, even though he was on Fox News?
Not necessarily. It's more about recognizing that even mainstream news outlets can platform individuals with extreme viewpoints or present information in a way that favors a particular narrative.
So we always have to be on the lookout for those hidden biases and agendas, no matter where the information's coming from.
Exactly. It's about being aware of the potential for manipulation and applying critical thinking skills to everything we consume, no matter the source.
It's like we need a decoder ring for the news these days.
You know, in a way, you do. And that decoder ring is critical thinking, asking questions like, who's saying this? What's their agenda? What evidence do they have? And how does this align with what I already know from reliable sources?
I love that analogy. But sometimes it feels kind of overwhelming, you know, especially when you're dealing with complex issues like intelligence gathering and national security.
Oh, I hear you. It can be a lot. But you don't have to become an expert on everything overnight. Just start with those basic questions and apply them consistently, and over time, those critical thinking skills will become second nature.
That's reassuring. It's not about having all the answers, but about having the right questions and being willing to seek out different perspectives.
Absolutely. And being open to challenging your own assumptions and biases along the way.
Great reminder. We've covered a lot of ground already, so let's take a quick break and come back to discuss the bigger picture of these claims and what they reveal about the whole misinformation landscape in our digital world. All right, we're back and still diving deep into these soft coup claims surrounding the 2016 transition.
Yeah, trying to make sense of it all.
It's like we're piecing together a puzzle, but some of the pieces are, well, they might be from a different box altogether.
That's a great analogy. And it really highlights the challenge we face these days. How do we even know what to believe anymore, especially when things get so political and emotions are running high?
Exactly. Like we were talking about before, just because someone's on a big platform doesn't mean what they're saying is true.
Right, critical thinking is key. Always.
So, about Sekulo's claims, are we saying they're definitely false? Or is there, like, a possibility that there's some truth to them?
Well, we can't really make a judgment call based just on what we've seen in these clips, but we can say that they're presented without, any real hard evidence, and he relies a lot on insinuation and charged language, which should always make you pause and think.
Okay, so even if we can't say for sure if there's any truth to these specific claims, it does bring up a bigger question. What's the point of even making these accusations if he's not providing evidence? Like, what's the goal here?
That's where we have to consider motive, right? Is he trying to inform or discredit someone? Or maybe just sow distrust? Could be any combination of those.
It feels kind of icky trying to figure out someone's intentions like that.
It's tricky, yeah, but it's important to think about the potential consequences of this type of rhetoric, regardless of what his intentions actually are.
So you mean even if he believes what he's saying, the way he's saying it could still have a negative impact?
Absolutely. Just by framing things in a certain way, using loaded language, you can shape people's perceptions without needing any actual proof.
So it's not really about whether this specific soft coup claim is true or not. It's about the bigger picture of how this affects our political discussions, our ability to even talk to each other when we disagree.
Right, exactly. And that feels especially relevant today, even though we're looking at events from years ago. The stuff we're talking about, it's all still happening now. The intelligence stuff, misinformation, and the importance of being critical thinkers, it's never been more relevant.
It really does feel like it's getting harder and harder to separate fact from fiction these days, especially with the social media and everyone having an opinion on everything.
Oh, absolutely. It's information overload out there, and it can be tough to filter through it all.
So what can we even do about it? How do we avoid falling for these tactics where someone sounds convincing but doesn't actually back it up?
Well, the main thing is to be an active consumer of information, not just passively absorbing whatever comes your way. Question the source, think about the context, and look for real evidence to support those claims. And remember, if something sounds too good to be true or too crazy to believe,
It probably is. Like that saying, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence.
exactly. And don't be afraid to challenge your own assumptions too. We all have biases that can color how we see things.
That's true. It's easy to just shut down if something doesn't fit our worldview or jump on board if it confirms what we already think.
It's natural, but the goal is to be aware of those biases and try to be as objective as possible.
This whole conversation is really making me think about how powerful language can be.
Yeah.
Like you said earlier, secular uses really strong wording, talking about shadow governments and whatnot. It makes it sound so dramatic, even without any real proof.
Right. Language has a huge impact. It can be used to persuade, manipulate, even deceive. That's why it's so important to be aware of those subtle cues and how they can play on our emotions.
So, how do we get better at this? Any tips for becoming more discerning consumers of all this information?
For sure. One thing is to diversify your sources. Don't just stick to one news outlet or social media feed. Try to get different perspectives, even from outlets you might not agree with.
Yeah, it's easy to get stuck in that echo chamber, just hearing the same voices over and over.
Exactly. Branch out a little, even if it's uncomfortable, it'll help you get a more well-rounded view.
I like that. Challenge yourself, broaden your horizons. Anything else?
Be careful with those attention-grabbing headlines and social media posts, the ones that try to get a rise out of you. A lot of times those are designed to go viral, not to actually inform you.
So don't just react to the headline, actually read the article or watch the video before you decide what you think.
Right. Look for evidence, think about who's saying it, and watch out for anything that feels super sensationalized or meant to make you angry.
Makes sense. And speaking of getting a rise out of you, remember that bone broth ad in the middle of all this serious talk about coups and espionage?
Oh, yeah, what a moment.
It was kind of funny. But it also shows how we're constantly being bombarded with messages trying to influence us, even when we don't realize it.
Absolutely. Whether it's an ad or a political statement, there are always tactics at play trying to shape our opinions and get us to do certain things.
So we really do need to be detectives, like we said at the beginning, always questioning, analyzing, figuring out the puzzle.
Exactly. Stay skeptical and use those critical thinking skills to separate the real from the fake.
Okay, this is all great advice, but I got to be honest, it can feel overwhelming sometimes. There's just so much out there, it's hard to know where to start.
I totally get it. It's a lot to process. But you don't have to be an expert on everything. Just focus on building those critical thinking muscles and using them whenever you come across new information.
So back to basics. Who, what, when, where, why?
Exactly. Ask those questions, look for evidence, and don't be afraid to say, I don't know, or I need more information before you decide what you think.
That's something I definitely need to work on. I feel like I need to have an opinion on everything right away, even if I haven't looked into it properly.
It's a common trap. Our culture is all about having those instant reactions, but it's okay to take your time, you know? Reflect, gather more information, then decide. It's the smarter way to go.
I think that's a great point to end on. We've covered a lot today, a lot for our listeners to think about.
Definitely. And as always, we encourage you to keep digging into these topics and share your own thoughts too. It's a conversation worth having.
You know, it's crazy how these claims can still, get into people's heads and make them believe things, even without any real proof.
It really shows how powerful a good story can be, right? We're wired to respond to narratives, especially if they tap into our fears or confirm what we already think.
So in this case, you've got Seculo claiming this soft coup happened, like there's this secret group controlling everything and working against the president. That's a pretty intense accusation to throw around, even without any evidence.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And think about when this was all happening, right after the 2016 election. Things were super tense. Everyone was on edge, trying to figure out what just happened.
So people were already primed to believe something like this, that the other side was doing something shady.
Exactly. It feeds into that existing distrust and makes people even more suspicious. And when you hear it repeated over and over, even on places like Fox News, it starts to sound more believable, even if there's nothing to back it up.
It's like that whole repeat a lie often enough thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Repetition breeds familiarity, and familiarity can sometimes be mistaken for truth.
Man, it makes you wonder what this kind of stuff does to us in the long run. Like, how does this affect how we see the world and each other?
That's a big question, and researchers are still trying to figure it all out. But we know that being exposed to this kind of misinformation can really mess with people's beliefs and attitudes.
So it's not just about this one soft coup claim.
Yeah.
It's about the damage that spreading these kinds of stories can do to our whole political system.
Exactly. If we're constantly bombarded with conspiracy theories and dramatic accusations, it becomes almost impossible to tell what's real and what's not. And it makes it way harder to have actual conversations and debates about the things that matter.
So where do we even go from here? We've talked about these claims about being critical thinkers, but it still feels like we're in this weird, confusing place.
And in a way, that's just the world we live in now. There's not always a clear answer, a simple truth. But that doesn't mean we stop searching for it or trying to understand things.
So what do we do? How do we use what we've learned about how easily information can be twisted and used against us?
We keep asking questions, keep challenging what we think we know, keep looking for different perspectives and trying to see the bigger picture.
And most importantly, stay informed and engaged, right?
Yeah.
Don't just tune it all out.
Absolutely. That's the best way to fight back against misinformation. To be active, informed, and engaged citizens who are willing to think for themselves.
That sounds like a good plan.
It's a process, for sure. One that takes effort and a willingness to be open to new ideas, even if they make us uncomfortable.
This whole deep dive has really been an eye-opener, that's for sure. It's changed how I think about the news and everything I see online.
That's what we hope for. To spark your curiosity and make you think critically about the world around you.
Mission accomplished, I'd say. Hopefully our listeners are feeling the same way, ready to put their detective hats on and do some digging of their own.
That's the goal. It's an essential skill these days, being able to sort through all the noise and find the truth.
Couldn't agree more. And on that note, we'll leave you with one last thought to chew on. In this crazy age of information overload, how do we make sure the truth wins out in the end? It's a question worth pondering, for sure. We'll be back next time with another deep dive into the wild world of information and ideas. Until then, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.